Hey everybody, welcome to the Kickstarter preview for Bomb Squad. This is going to be a release from Tasty Minstrel Games, designed by Dan Keltner and David Short. Basically, to sum up and be very glib about it, this is Hanabi plus a whole mess of a game underneath it. So if you're familiar with Hanabi, it won the Spiel des Jahres a couple years ago, and it's a game where players would draw cards, but they would hold the cards away from them, and through deduction and clues with the other players in cooperation with the other players, you try to play cards in a certain order in a stack. Now this has that same mechanic of holding the cards away from yourself, but you're doing it in kind of a programmatic way as you play cards to navigate this little robot that's going to go through and defuse bombs, free hostages, and do all these kinds of cool things. And so it's a cooperative game, and you're going to be playing cards, and there's a timer in this case. So unlike Hanabi, where you have a limited amount of clues and you can discard cards to get extra clues, this one is on the clock. So you don't want to make mistakes though, because you'll get penalized, use up the robot's energy, all kinds of other cool stuff. So let's take a look at how the game's going to work, then I'll come back and give you my impressions of it. Okay, I've gone ahead and set up the introductory scenario here. Now players are going to be controlling this little robot device here. Now this one kind of hints that this may be a miniature in the game, but that might also be a stretch goal. So they're also included this little token here, so you could use a little chit to move around. What you're going to be doing is moving this guy around, and you're trying to get him next to hostages to free the hostages, as well as next to bombs to disarm the bombs. You also have to unlock doors or open doors. And as you can see, there's different colors and levels. So here's a level 1 hostage, a level 1 door, and we've got a level 1 bomb, and we've got a level 2 hostage door and bomb there. So you're going to need different cards to play to succeed at the scenario. So there's going to be a variety of scenario setups. And if you can't tell, these are modular here, and I should say, I always forget this, these are of course prototype components, but this is modular. And so you can actually see this will come with extra pieces here, so you can extend this, and then you can have larger maps, more difficult maps, once you add in some of those larger tiles there, maybe 3 bombs, 3 hostages, different conditions for winning. The mission book that I have, that's currently the mission book, comes with 2 kind of training missions, Alpha and Bravo. What you see right now is Alpha mission, and then it has 8 regular missions, and the rules hint at some kind of campaign type of activity, but you can basically play the game as much as you want, make it as hard as you want, because not only are there different missions, but there's different difficulty levels, there's cards for the robot. So currently I'm using Felix, the trainee, and you can see he's got starting battery, reserve battery. It describes a little bit of his abilities, but if I flip it over, I can use the expert version of Felix. And there's also Octotread, and there's a trainee version of him, as well as an expert version of that robot. And there also will be role cards that players can select, and this is going to give you different special abilities during the game. There's a lot here included, with this prototype that I have. I don't know if all these are going to be included or how settled they are in there. But there is several in here. So my main point here is there's going to be a lot of ways to play the game, and one thing I'll get into sort of the review part. One thing with Hanabi, after you play it with the same group, you kind of solve it in a way, and you got to play with a different group, kind of get each other's verbal and physical tics, and then it's a new puzzle to solve. Whereas this one, you can play the main scenario and then move on to harder and harder scenarios and increase the difficulty and change out role cards. So it's going to present to you a different puzzle every time. If we take a look at our training mission here, you can see the layout, you can see where it tells us to put the bombs in the doors. And it also here has 2 timers, Bomb A, which is this red one here, and Bomb B, which is this one here. So Bomb A is going to go off at 8 minutes. Now, you lose the game if your robot ever runs out of energy, which I'll talk about a little bit later, or one of the bombs goes off. If you're able to defuse Bomb A but don't quite make it to B, of course you still lose because everything has exploded. You're going to win the game by disarming both bombs. Now you can see here a little scoring here. There are hostages here, and you're going to get extra points for recovering the hostages. The other thing to keep in mind with the hostages is that you cannot unlock a door of a color unless you've actually freed a hostage of that color. So you can see here we've got a red hostage with the red door. Before we even get to open that door, we've got to free that hostage. So the game really gears you towards freeing the hostages. Now, as I alluded to earlier, each mission has a score. So you have kind of a perfect score all the way to a very low score. And you can see you can play those in standard and epic as well. So you're going to get points for the hostages, and you basically take their face value there and multiply them by 2. You'll get the same here for the bombs. You'll get a bonus 5 points for disarming all the bombs. And any hostages that are still on the board, you're going to get 1 point for. You may not have freed them all, but you know, if you leave 1 or 2 back and disarm all the bombs, you'll still get a point for those. And then you also lose 1 point for each piece of the reserve battery that you've used. So in this case, we lose 4 points from our score. So as I said here, all the actions of this robot here are going to be dictated by play of cards. Now remember, all the cards are going to be held away from you, and depending on the number of players, you'll have a certain amount. So like in a 2-player game, you'll have 6 cards and so on. And there's a few actions you can do on your turn. One is to give intel to another player about their cards. So if we were able to see this hand here, maybe these are the cards that we're seeing from this player, we can describe a couple of things. We can name the color or the type. The color is represented by the number, so the 2s are all yellows and the 3s are all green. So I could tell them, hey, these 2 are yellows, or 2 values, and these 2 here are open doors. So we can start to, you know, deduce what we have in front of us. Now the next thing that a player could do on their turn is to play a card, and based on the scenario, you're either going to play cards face up or face down to these little slots here. So as these fill up, you're going to sort of seed in a set of programming commands for the robot to execute when you activate the robot. Now once you get 7 cards here, then you're forced to activate it on the next player's turn. They have to activate it. You can go ahead and rearrange the cards however you want when you activate it, but the activation is how you're going to execute the robot. Before we get into activation though, the other thing that you might do besides playing the card either face up or face down, again dictated by the scenario and the difficulty, is to actually discard a card. But before you discard it, you're going to name some of the attributes of the card itself. And what you're going to do is check the robot's recharge ability. So Felix here has recharge 1 or 2 battery by correctly naming 1 or 2 attributes when discarding a card. So I may say this is a red, and so I would actually recharge just 1 battery here. Now Octotread has a simpler ability, recharge 1 battery by discarding 1 card with a known attribute. So you only got to get 1 right, but he only has a maximum recharge of 1. And you might be asking yourself, what is the battery for? Well, depending on the robot that you pick, you're going to have a starting main battery value as well as a maximum, and then also a reserve battery. Now as you do activations, when I talk about activating the robot, you're going to start spending energy out of the battery. So once your main battery starts to get low, you're going to want to discard cards to recharge the battery. So you may have some cards in your hand that have nothing to do with the game. So you may have like this card here, which is a level 3 save hostage. Well, there's no level 3 guys out here, or maybe you've already, you know, saved the level 3 hostage. So those cards aren't dead to you. You still want to know what they are so that you can use them to charge the battery. Now once the main battery has been depleted, you're going to start going into the reserve battery. If you ever get the reserve battery down to 0, you're going to lose. But the other thing to keep in mind is once you've depleted the main battery, you cannot recharge the reserve battery. So you want to recharge early and often before you start using up the reserve battery. So why are we so concerned about the energy level in the robot's battery? Well, each robot defines here the amount of energy that they use in their battery whenever you activate the current card set. So I set up a little bit of an example here. Let's say, you know, we're on my turn. I feel pretty good about the cards that have been played. So I say I'm going to activate the robot, keeping in mind this whole time there's a timer running. So I'm immediately going to spend the 3 battery plus up to 5 battery. So the more cards that you activate, the more, you know, energy obviously the robot's going to use, up to a maximum of plus 5. If you do, you know, 6 and 7 cards, you're still only going to spend an extra 5. So in this case, we're going to spend 3 plus 5, so 8 total energy. And this robot here starts with 12. So that is a good chunk of energy. That robot's going to be very far down along the way. So what you're going to do is you're going to reveal all these cards, and then we can rearrange these however we choose. So you don't have to play them in the right order. You just got to get the right sort of sequence in there, and then whoever's turn it is when they activate it is going to rearrange. Now if you have less than 6 or 7 cards, you can, if you want, discard 1 card. And for example, let's look at what we got here. So we've got open level door, level 1 door, so open that. That'll be open. Then we want to move up twice, boom, boom, and then we want to rescue the hostage. Well, these 3 are very pertinent for us. These other 2, they have nothing to do with what we're doing. So in this case, we're probably going to want to discard one of these so it doesn't penalize us. Now this one here left over is going to penalize us. So you've got to be very careful about, building up too much of a big set of commands, because if you get yourself wrong, you're going to get really wrong, because you're going to have, whatever the base cost is plus the extra, plus you're going to get penalized for any leftover cards that are unable to be performed. So in this case, there's no level 3 hostage around, so we're not able to perform that. And one thing that's interesting about the movement I should mention is you must move the full movement. You can't just go, oh, this was a move 2, but I'm only actually going to move 1 space. So if you're not able to move that full movement, you're also going to take a penalty. And for each card that is, ineligible or illegal, you're going to lose 2 energy. So we're going to lose the 2 energy there, plus the 3 from the battery, and then plus another 5 from the total cost because we played 5 cards. So we used up almost all of our main battery there. And all we did was open a door, move a couple of spaces, and free a hostage. We still have a lot of stuff that we would have had to do before this and a lot of stuff to do after this. So we've really got to replenish our battery at this point, and maybe we would have done that, as we were setting cards down here to sort of max out our battery before we're trying a big maneuver like that. So that's pretty much basically how you're going to play the game. There are some variants. You can play variants where you just play a card and you immediately do what it says. You could have multiple robots moving around so that you control one robot and then the other. And of course you can create your own scenarios out here on the board with multiple bombs and kind of randomly distribute different things. And of course you can go through the mission book kind of as a campaign and stuff like that. So let's go back to my talking head. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the overview. Now in the intro I made a lot of analogies to Hanabi. And one thing, it's kind of obvious but it should be stated, is the time element, the timer of this really sets it apart. Now you don't have a fixed number of clues, you do have to manage the battery level of the robot. But I played this with 2 players and also with 3 players. And with a 2-player, you can get into a nice synergy of, okay, this is that, this is that, this is that, this is that. So you can really get into a rhythm, especially if you know the other person well. You can, give clues back and forth without really too much worrying, and then start playing the cards down. Now the game, of course, is easier when you play the cards face up, because you'll be like, oh, I didn't think it was that card. You can kind of work around the card, or okay, we can discard that if that was, we got on the wrong track. And you can really get into a nice simpatico, especially with 2 players. Now playing the cards face down, on the other hand, you know what you think you know what you played. Everybody else knows what you played, and that's the part where it's kind of hard. Everybody's like, like, why did you play that? Well, and that wasn't the one that we wanted you to play, really. So because though it's timed, it has a cool element where you get that frantic pace. And it, once you kind of unwrap the program, if you will, of what you've set out, then it's kind of like, oh crap, or oh, this is great. And so that's a really cool element, and it kind of goes against preventing the cheating of Hanabi. Now, in Hanabi you can kind of, you kind of try to hold your tongue so that you don't cheat. Well, this, because of the time element, you almost don't have time to react, especially as the game progresses. Early on in the game you might get some of that. But as I said, during the walkthrough and the intro, this is cool because, once you play, one mission or one scenario, and you get that, then you can increase the difficulty level, increase the different parameters, the roll cards, and all that kind of cool stuff to keep coming back to the game. And really, I'm kind of of 2 minds about this. I've only played the prototype and that, but I'm kind of like, I really love Hanabi. I got to tell you that Hanabi is like one of my top games of all time. I really enjoy it. And I'm like, this kind of makes me rethink Hanabi a little bit. I'm like, wow, this has really added a lot to it. And a lot of cool theme. The other thing, that's interesting about this game is you're going in and rescuing hostages, defusing bombs. That's not a theme that you really see much of. I can't really honestly think of a game. The game that comes to mind is a video game of Counter-Strike, but that's a first-person shooter. And, one side is the bad guys, the other guys are the good guys going in trying to defuse a bomb or rescue the hostages. In this case, of course, you're cooperating and everybody's the good guy in this one. So that's an interesting theme. I like that. It does feel kind of thematic with the different roles. I mean, even though you're kind of, you're all kind of just mechanically programming the robot. Once you kind of add those role cards, you can see, oh, okay, I'm kind of the guy back at the base, issuing the orders. And the other guys, that activates the robot is the guy that's actually, has his hand on the joystick. So the theme does actually pull you in, even with this kind of Hanabi abstract mechanism. So anyway, so that is Bomb Squad. Definitely take a look at it and enjoy. Thanks.